Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar. Thank you all for hopping on and joining us today. We've got a great conversation to be had, and we have the right people here to speak to that. Okay, so super excited to dive into it. But before we do that, let's talk about what we're going to be speaking about today. Okay, so what you all are here for is we're talking about how to fuel explosive sales performance with commission alignment. And we have 3 pros here that are going to help us dive deep into this conversation. Well, without further ado, I want to introduce our panelists. David, Jeff, Siva, thank you all so much for taking the time to bless us with your knowledge and expertise on this topic. Welcome to a Sales Hack webinar here.
Thank you, Michael.
Great.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, super excited for this.
Awesome. But what I like to do before we dive into the conversation is just get a bit of background on each one of you, so we can get a bit more acquainted with the audience and everyone can kind of know what you're all about. So Siva, I'll start with you. Do you mind just giving us a bit of background on yourself, who you are, what you're all about, so we can get a bit more acquainted?
Absolutely. Hey everyone, I'm Siva, the founder and CEO of Everstage. Everstage is a modern benchmark for commissions management. So within a short span, several fast-growing companies have adopted Everstage to automate their entire commissions process. And by doing that, provide real-time visibility and transparency of commissions to sales teams, and also gamify the entire experience to drive performance. Before Everstage, I used to run the revenue operations globally for this public company right now, Freshworks. I was part of the very early journey there, built the team from scratch, from a member of just myself to a 25 member team. Saw the journey from about 30 million in ARR to 200 million. So I'm super passionate about everything revenue operations, and specifically about commissions and the power of incentives. Super excited to be here, and really happy to see Jeff and David. They are pros on this, so very happy to be on this conversation alongside them and chat about this.
Awesome. Thanks, Siva. Well, I'm very excited to have you here, as I know you know this stuff inside and out. So thank you for joining us. And I'll throw it over to David. David, do you mind just giving us a bit of background on yourself, who you are, so we can get a bit more acquainted with you?
Yeah, absolutely, Mikey. So my name is David Lebanon. I'm currently, the head of revenue operations at ChargeBee. For those of you who don't know ChargeBee, we're a subscription management platform. We have offices globally. We've recently hit our 1,000th employee mark, which was amazing. And we have over 27,000 customers globally. Our mission is to maximize the growth potential of every business by delivering the world's best subscription management platform. So a little bit about that. About myself, I enjoy being part of a high growth startup. I have the enterprise experience needed really to build top of the line revenue operations team. I bring together the 4 main pillars of revenue operations: so operations management, insights, enablement, and systems operations. All of which have the customer as top of mind, ingrained in their DNA, helping them maximize their revenue. So we sit in that important intersection of an organization, making sure that the wheels are greased and that the ship is sailing in the right direction.
Amazing. Awesome, David. Well, thank you so much for joining us and giving us the time today to learn from you and your thoughts. I'm very excited to hear what you have to say. Last but not least, Jeff, do you mind just giving us a bit of background on yourself, what you're all about, so we can get a bit more acquainted?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me again. So I'm Jeff. My background has been in high growth startups. I've joined a couple companies where we grew from 10 million up to $80 million in ARR in under 30 months. And in that time period, I led the sales operations or the revenue operations teams to almost very similar to David's 4 pillars: process, enablement, advisory, and systems. So supporting everything from top of funnel all the way to the late funnel renewals and upsells. I have a real passion for the space. And in fact, I run a small community on Patreon called the RevOps Rehab Group. You can look us up on Patreon as well. I also publish a weekly newsletter at revengine.substack.com where I talk about kind of practitioner level topics around revenue operations.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Well, thanks for joining us again. I know you've been on a couple of these, so really appreciate you giving us the time as well. Fantastic. Okay. So we know everybody. This is great. I'm excited. So let's dive into the juice and the stuff that we all came here for. Okay. So I'm going to start off with a quick question, and Siva, I'll start with you to get your thoughts here. Since we're talking about commission alignment, obviously, commissions are a massive thing for reps in terms of being able to achieve their goals and drive their activities. But how have you been able, at Everstage and in your past work life, been able to make sure your reps actually understand the impact of their commissions?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Mikey. And oftentimes, that's where the first problem really lies, right? So, especially in the technology world and in the SaaS world, I would say sometimes revenue teams and RevOps, in some sense, have also been, kind of can be blamed a bit for the complexity of the commission plan, right? So I think we tend to get a little creative with all of the different structures that we put in on commission plans, and that's what I've also seen not only in my own experience but also a ton of other companies that we currently work with, right? So I think the first step is really to understand what you are designing as part of the commission plan for the rep, right? And in fact, we'd recently written an article around this using Stephen Covey's circles of influence, right? So a good way to think about this is really start off by saying, what's this person responsible for? And when you talk about responsibility, what do they control? What do they influence? And everything else is outside of that, right? So if you take an account executive, obviously they are in charge of revenue goals, and that's their primary circle of control. From a circle of influence standpoint, possibly they could influence some portion on the discounting, pricing piece, or contracting, and all of that different stuff. And then there's everything else which is outside of it. So starting off by creating the commission plan, which is relevant and direct to the circles of control for each persona, is important. And secondly, to your question on how do you make it easily understandable, you need to have, and that's where a lot of companies fail, right? Like you create all of these beautiful plans, and you give it off to the salesperson. I mean, they try to understand, they have some form of understanding is what they think, and then only when the payout happens, they come back to say, hey, you know what, I didn't realize this was there, or there was this clawback clause that was associated. And so it's super important to be able to give them some form of just mimic what would happen if you were to close certain deals, and what will be the kind of, if you were to close so much revenue, what will be the kind of commission payouts. Give them a flavor of the future before they actually sign off, either in the document or through a tool or any other, like even a mock spreadsheet that you can create, right? But super important for you to be able to give them that visibility and visualization of how all of this will work, so as to make sure that they completely understand the implications of each of those different items that you have on the commission plan. Yeah, so I think that's broadly my thought there. But there are a lot of specifics, obviously, we can get into. But at a high level, that's super important part of. It's just not about setting those commission plans, but really driving and making sure people understand what each of those specific components mean.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I love that. Jeff, what are your thoughts on that one?
Well, I normally try to design plans working backwards from, what are the key objectives of the business and what are the behaviors that we want to drive. So typically I'll start with what are the core tenets that we want to optimize for. And then you have these different populations of roles within organization. So you might have folks who are focused on purely generating top of funnel, and that's what you want because you want to create a specialist organization where you have folks who are openers, setting up meetings, and then you have your closers, folks who are working the sales funnel and closing and acquiring new customers. So start with, what are the different roles that make sense for the coverage model for our go-to-market? Then secondly, what are the behaviors that we want to drive? And you can start to distill those two pillars into what you call your core tenets. So for example, comp plans vary all over the place. I've supported a number of different plans, from paying on gross margin to paying on collection to paying on bookings, and then having a definition around what bookings means, focusing on 1-year deals versus multi-year. So every business has a multitude of ways they conduct their business, and comp plans are meant to be a carrot that helps achieve the outcomes that they're looking for. And so there's a lot of different ways you can design your comp plans. But you can start with those tenets. Then secondly, you want to design plans that are simple to understand, and gives folks the ability to at least, as Sivas had mentioned, to scenario plan and create what ifs. Because at the end of the day, you're looking at OTEs today, they're 100% leveraged plans. So half of their OTE is in fixed and half of their pay is in variable, especially for pure hunters. And so you want to make sure that you're giving folks the ability to plan carefully and conduct their business accordingly.
Mm-hmm. I love that point where you said with the what ifs, right? Like having the ability to see what could come if this happened, right? Which then ultimately drives the motivation and so on. So I think that's a great point there. David, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I know, definitely couldn't agree more with what has been said so far. Maybe I can help also summarize a little bit of that. But obviously, having alignment with the key objectives, really with the organizational strategy, and the behaviors that the organization wants to drive, even the investors' expectations. When investors put down their money, there's a revenue potential that they want to make sure you get to. So the comp plans are a way to making sure that you align the reps and the managers and the territory heads with that as well. I think some key things that were mentioned here, having transparency with the reps, whether it's giving them, payout simulator or doing it on mock spreadsheets, whether, what Jeff said, the what ifs, it's all about communication and giving them the visibility into what could happen, giving them the ability to foresee what their actions and what they're going to be doing and how that's going to be, beneficial to them. And having all of that clearly communicated, having clear, concise comp plans that are not overly complex, even for the team that's supposed to calculate them and measure them. You want to make sure that it's something that's scalable. So as an organization grows, we grew tremendously over the last 2 years. We added many roles and many comp plans. And Shiv, she's on this call here. She's my commission specialist. She can definitely attest to that. As the year began, how many different roles we have to go through and make sure that everybody is aligned. And more importantly, once the payroll cycle comes in, there's always questions. There's always going to be questions. So the more pre-work you do, the more simulators you do, the better you are when that comes around.
Totally. And going to quick follow on that piece of transparency. When you've been transparent with reps in the past and so on, how have you seen that change their performance? Do you see them exceed more so, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, first of all, they're fully they're engaged. They understand that if you're transparent, you're showing them that the comp plans are aligned with the organization of goals. They're aligned with what the executive leadership wants, with what the investors want. So they understand that they're part of the bigger picture. They're part of their organization. It hypes up their commitment to the success of the organization. So definitely, and it also, you acknowledge their thoughts and their insights. So, we always talk to at least, as many reps as possible. Obviously not everybody, but, definitely the territory heads, the managers, the directors, and some of the reps, to making sure that, we hear them and that they know that we listen to them, and vice versa. And then when we come forward with the plans, they understand that, we have the organization's best interest as well as their best interest. And it's always somewhere in between. Each side always pulls to the other direction, but you got to make sure there's a nice equilibrium to that.
Yeah, no, totally. I totally agree with that. Jeff, how have you seen, being transparent with, the companies that you work with and so on? with the reps, and how have you noticed that when you're being more transparent around commissions and so on, that reps performance do increase, or what are your thoughts there?
So I would actually disagree. But I think when I think about how commissions are, it's not really driving increased performance, but the way I think about it is it's one less thing to worry about, right? So sales reps, and when I was a sales rep a long time ago, I would actually have a spreadsheet, and I would start calculating, what would happen, and the sheer amount of time that it would take to create those analyses and figure out what my scenarios would be. That took me off the selling floor, right? And I've seen it plenty of times on the selling floor as well, where reps are distracted. And so you want to create a distraction-free environment, because I think that distraction-free selling is true selling. You're able to focus on what really matters, which is thinking about your account plans, your territory plans, and working through your opportunities. And commission should be a byproduct of proper selling. But if we're creating comp plans that are essentially hurdles for reps to do their job, then I think it becomes that we're actually creating a disservice to the business as well as to our sales floor. So I do think in some ways, if we give them the tools, such as scenario planning, we give them tools such as what ifs, we can show them trackers, particularly mini comp plans. You'll see them. You won't know where you stand until the very end of a pay period. It would be helpful to see along the way, day 1 through day 30, how you're performing against your monthly. And if you're in the quarterly plan, if you're on month 3, how you're doing 1 quarter through the year. So having that visibility, the transparency gives you a sense of where you stand, and it's one less thing to worry about. So you can worry about the bigger things.
No, I love that point of view. I like the idea of the, distraction-free selling process. That's a great point. Siva, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think if you ask any sales rep, how they think about commissions, especially in companies where it's all run on spreadsheets, right? You would hear a lot of comment around or at least feedback to say that they distrust the system in some sense, right? Every sales rep has their own spreadsheet where they note down the deals that they closed and the commissions that they're supposed to get, and do all of these calculations that even Jeff talked about, and what we call as shadow accounting, right? So basically every rep has their own spreadsheet, and then they're trying at the end of the month or end of the quarter, there's this comparison to say, hey, what, this is what I see, why is the number different, or why is this deal only getting me paid so much? So there's just so much of lack of trust in the system, and as Jeff mentioned, just so much time that's getting wasted in doing shadow accounting, right? And putting all of this together, just the anxiety of, am I going to get what I think I should get? And all of that stuff is just diversion away from the real focus. And being transparent is super important, because we know the world that we are in at this point. There's just so much competition for good talent. And, talent wants to go to places where people are extremely transparent about what goals they're setting, how they're going to be measured on their performance, and how they're going to be rewarded for it. So I think it's super important to be transparent, to be able to attract the right talent and also drive behavior and performance.
Totally. No, I love that. And, I know we were going to talk about this more towards the end here, but just because you were speaking about talent, I know, Jeff, you mentioned, commissions and commission plan being a huge thing for retention of good talent. So what I would love to hear your thoughts on how the commissions play into retention and keeping the talent.
I don't think anyone is surprised by what's happening today with the Great Resignation. It's folks have choices, right? The pandemic has clearly demonstrated to professionals that they can bring their services to the highest bidder, but they can also bring it to workplaces that optimize for other things that employees are looking for. And so comp plans are just another tool that companies can use as an acquisition tool to bring in the best and the brightest for their teams. But I also believe it's about mitigating the folks leaving the door, right? So when I'm thinking about attrition, there are like 2 flavors of it. There's the regrettable and the non-regrettable. It's that first category that I really want to make sure that we're holding the best folks on our within our company. And a comp plan is one way to do that, right? So if you go to a situation where they are distracted, they're not distraction free, you want to make sure that they're coming to a place where they can trust that the company has their back and that they can operate the way they know how and they can perform to their highest standards. And so these comp plans serve as a reminder to teams that they can hold on to their best employees. So I do think in the coming year you'll see an explosion in benefits. You've probably already seen that with remote work. And then secondly, just the ease of comp plans.
Have you ever, just a question from myself, have you ever done, like, is it organization wide comp plan, or have you ever kind of done it where on like an individual basis based off of performance or something like that, creating a specific comp plan for that person or XYZ? Have you ever done that, or is it usually on a more kind of broader approach?
Try to stay away from it, in my professional opinion. You want to make sure that you're creating an environment where folks have a path. So start with a performance management framework. Second, have a career pathing conversation and make sure that's codified. And then that way folks know, here's where I stand within the specific levels, and here are the comp plans I qualify for. Now, do I think there's some idiosyncrasy around pay bands? Absolutely. I think you can start to codify, what your lower and your upper boundaries are for fixed, as well as the rates. I do think some certain plans do demand differentiated comp rates. For example, reps who manage named accounts, that your baseline is going to be different for account managers. Also, reps who have been there for a longer time frame and are more experienced and are able to handle a higher quota commission rate. Naturally, you're going to have some compression on the rate that they're looking for. So when you're designing your rates and your plans, you want to make sure that you're not creating these one-offs. You want to create something that's uniform and universal, because you want to optimize for the name on the front of the jersey, the business, and not necessarily the name on the back of the jersey, the individual.
Got it. Yeah, love that. David, what are your thoughts on commission plans and retention and that whole kind of idea there?
Yeah, no. First of all, no, Jeff spoke wonderfully about this. I couldn't agree more. I think on a high level, commissions plans are a good way to bring on good and experienced talent as well as retain them. I agree with him. You shouldn't go on the one-offs. It's always dangerous. You want to keep that line across the organization as much as possible. Unfortunately, I think that's not always the reality, and we have to be able to also be flexible and agile enough. If the business needs and the organization's focus merit and a one-off, that's something you have to do. I had this in a previous role of mine, where a few circumstances brought together a unique plan for an individual, both from a geo penetration, new product, as well as a way to retain them. So literally, we went up against a competitor. They were trying to poach the whole sales team at once, and this was the top salesperson. So we had to tailor-made a comp plan that was going to retain him, at the same time align with the organization goals that we had for that year. It wasn't a best practice. I couldn't agree more with Jeff on that one. But sometimes you also have to be flexible enough to accommodate that, because with the market, especially today, that sometimes is a reality. So yeah, it's definitely a tool to retain top talent, bring on new talent, and you always have to have your ear to the ground on what the market is ascribing, what the competitors are doing. You should try to be innovative at some point if you can. Sometimes that helps, but also don't make it over complex. Keep it simple, keep it straight to the point, and give them that visibility of what they will be, what the potential earnings that could be.
Yeah, love that. Great, Siva. Do you have any further thoughts on the retention piece of being transparent with the commissions and so on to build on anything that David or Jeff has said?
I think both of them have wonderfully covered this. But fundamentally, as both of them said, it's just the market that determines the current situation, and the best companies win when they're more transparent and build trust with their reps. It's as simple as that.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. The more transparent, the more you feel a part about within the organization, and that you are not as you grow into a bigger realm and like much larger enterprise company, then you're not just a number, you're much more a part of the organization. So I totally agree with that. Awesome. Love that. Okay. So I know Jeff said some stuff on, not having a distraction free environment, but I would love to hear some thoughts, because for instance, myself, as throughout my career as a seller, I always did like seeing something, right, and seeing my progress, right, and that that I'm very competitive, and I've always been like that, and some sales reps are the same way. Do you think, maybe not for all, but by providing some sort of like visual / like space of your reps' earnings, have you ever seen that from your personal experience, increase their performance or decrease their performance? Siva, I'll start with you on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the data points that we're seeing, not only within my experience as a RevOps, professional, but also broadly through the platform that we've built at Everstage, is that you could activate certain points of behaviors that you want to have the reps exhibit. And what I mean by that is, let's take, for example, you are a company who's trying to incentivize the behavior of driving multi-year deals instead of monthly or annual contracts, right? So you want to push more contracts to multi-year, and so maybe you set this as part of your incentive program. You've probably put an accelerator on your compensation plan that sets this or is trying to help drive that behavior. But what happens is, it's very hard to visualize this, right? Because this is not just your revenue or the ARR that you bring into the deal, but more specifically to say, hey, you know what? If you were to close a 2-year deal, then this is your accelerator. If it were to be a 3-year contract, then it's probably something else. And then there's again tiering and all of that different stuff. So it get a little complex when you add more than one component to it. Say, for example, you are able to provide a platform for the rep to go in and look at their pipeline and say, hey, these are my deals. This is the deal size. What if I push this deal from a single year to a multi-year contract? How much is the additional commissions can I make, right?
Mm.
And at the end of the day, you're able to visualize that, and obviously that's aligned with the behavior that the company wants you to exhibit, and you push that behavior, and at the end of the day, you make the contract more sticky with with the company, and you also benefit as a sales rep. So those are examples that we've seen, which is not just the unilateral way of just looking at, hey, this deal, how much commissions that I make, but actually even play around with your deals, see what you can do. What if I offer a little lesser discount? What if I do this push to multi-year contract? How much more can I do? And that drives behavior in the way that you want the reps to exhibit. And so that's the biggest lever that you can unlock with visualization and what ifs and forecasting by playing around with pipeline.
Love that. Great. David, what are your thoughts on a visual space for reps earning? Have you seen that increase, decrease, or the performance?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the tool that we onboarded gives them that full visibility essentially, and that creates the motivation aspect of it, because now they're able to really visualize, to what Steve said. They're really visualizing what their potential. They know, it's very clear to them what they've closed already. They can focus on the rest of the month and the rest of the deals that they need to focus on, so that they understand what levers they have to pull. And I think it also, to Jave's previous point, it takes away, like, they spend less time thinking about how to achieve their quota, since they know exactly where they are at that point, and they're focused on selling, which is essentially what we want them to do. We want them to be focused on what they need to do, and that will equal for them the incentives that they end up getting. So having that visually in front of them is always beneficial. They if you go to, like, whether it's spreadsheets or or not visualization. It typically takes them more time to see it or understand it, more questions, a lot more back and forth, and ultimately we want them on the floor selling. That's what they're all about. That's what they need to be doing. So definitely we've seen that not only the motivation pick up, but also the time that they spend is a lot less. They see it right away. They know what they need to focus on. They know what's the next deal. They know the kind of the best deal that they need to focus on if the time is short. Like, we got a week and a half left of the quarter now for us. So they're focusing on those deals that are going to move the needle for them and for the organization, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. And that's always the conversation of, how do we eliminate all the admin stuff and just make sure that they can sell and do what they want to do, essentially, right? So I love that point there. Jeff, do you have any thoughts on the whole? I know you said that one less distraction, but what are your thoughts on the whole visual piece for reps to kind of see where they're going?
Well, I think there are two types of visuals that make sense, right? One is the individual attainment, like how am I doing, so I can back into what my payout's going to be for the month or the quarter for the year. And then secondly, there's a public facing visualization, which is the leaderboard. And this is focused primarily on attainment. And so as a manager, you want to use that as a tool to cue certain signals to the business. So for example, if you're earlier on in the month or the quarter, or if you're on an annual plan, you're really developing ways to motivate your team. So, you're going to focus primarily on, look back, look ahead. What did we do the last period? What are we going to do this period? And here's our attack strategy to be able to attain our goal. Middle of the month, you want to use your leaderboard to, not only take care of, you're not really worried about the top rep, you're really focused on the middle lineup of your organization. So you want to make sure that bell curve is starting to hit above whatever your average attainment that you set on your plan is. And then at the end of the month, you're really trying to squeeze as much productivity and performance, particularly making sure that deals don't slip and any upside deals can get captured. So depending on the time of the year or time of the period, you want to make sure that you're using your leaderboard and positioning your messaging effectively for whatever the organization is trying to achieve.
Got it. Love that. Great insight there. Awesome, guys. Well, love this conversation. This is great. I love hearing this because, I don't think it's talked about enough. So, but moving on, I want to talk about gamification. Okay, so it's starting to become a huge thing for companies, and helping sales teams and reps drive success. What have you implemented at your company or past companies that has helped motivate reps? Do you have any examples or anything like that? David, I'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, no, great question. I think it's a good segue from the kind of leadership, leaderboard that Jeff just talked about. Obviously, salespeople, the go-to-market folks. The good thing about them is that they're very competitive. So as soon as you put them head to head, as soon as you visualize that for them, whether it's through the daily, I think Kartik here mentioned daily, and the sales league, president's club. There's a lot of ways to get people engaged and want them to overperform and be number one, or be in the top 10, top 50. So yeah, I mean, for ChargeBee specifically, first of all, we do a lot of that. We tried numerous tools in the past. Adoption wasn't great, to be very honest, but we have recently onboarded Everstage, to be very transparent here, to help automate our sales commissions process. I think gamification is one of their main features. It really helps us in real time show kind of show the commissions across the board, the leaderboard. We also it helps the sales reps really track their current kind of quotas and pipelines and forecast how much they can potentially earn. It helps us put some aspect around who are the leaders. I love the kind of the sales league idea that Kartik mentioned here. This is great. Daily sales performance is good. Weekly is obviously much more easy to maintain. Definitely over communication in terms of where people are. It also lets the organization know how we're doing as a whole, as a team, and that driving competition between one another. I think I'm sure most of us or all of us will agree that it helps drive performance, and that's part of the nature and the characteristics of these personas that go out there and sell every day. They want to be number one. It's part of who they are, and once you motivate them to do even more of that, everybody benefits. They benefit on a personal level, the teams benefit, and obviously the organization.
Totally agreed. Love that. Siva, do you have anything to kind of build off of that?
I think, I mean, at the end of the day, as David mentioned, sales is a persona that's hugely competitive, and at the end of the day, gamification is a great way to kind of get that competition in the right way for the company and channel the energy in the right format to be able to drive results, right? So I think we personally feel very strongly about this, and essentially have seen this benefit in multiple different organizations where they look at a gamified incentive experience to drive performance. So totally agree with David, and we've seen that in several organizations as well.
Great. Yeah, I love that. Love that. Jeff, what are your thoughts on the gamification piece?
I think if any groups out there that has invented gamification, it's been the sales team, right? Gamification is simply the productization of many of the behaviors that are endemic or inherent within, what sales teams build into their incentive behaviors. What I think is different these days, right? Because when you think about gamification, we solve for it with short or long-term solutions in the past. Short-term solutions, spiffs, contests, awards. And then in the long term, obviously comp plans, performance management, and career path conversations. And so those two tools were largely handled in the sphere of manual processes. Today with gamifications, you're building in and layering alerts, notifications, and you're trying to add an element of fun to not just competition. You want to add an element of fun. So, what is considered fun? I think a lot of folks really enjoy the people that they work with, especially in a remote culture. You want to make sure that you're building some pathways for folks to engage with one another, particularly if they're remote. The second thing is making the mundane particularly fun. I can't tell you enough how much sales reps love filling out their next steps and never being messaged by their sales ops peers or their rev ops peers. But you want to make sure that you're putting some sort of some points on the scale so that reps can accumulate points on the board that are meaningful, but also meaningful for the business. And the third part of gamification is really a flex, right? It's the ability for folks to champion and bang on the drum and shout, look what I did, look what I accomplished. I'm the chief, I'm number one for the month or the week. And you want to make sure that it's in the spirit of good fun. And so when I'm thinking about gamification, you're translating what is considered like old inherent behavior around the short or long-term conversations, and then translating them into the software layer. And I think you're seeing a lot of tools do it right out of the box. In the old days, when I'm configuring tools, I'm actually putting leaderboards together out of dashboards, and then trying to make sure that stalled pipeline hygiene issues, things that we're classically worried about, are not annoyances, but actually things that reps look forward to.
Got it. Yeah, I love that. And to go to a fast follow on that is, have you seen, by having that, like the camaraderie piece of sales and sales reps is can be huge for a lot of like motivation. Have you seen, by implementing some sort of gamification or anything like that, have you seen that has helped reps reach their goals more so, or any thoughts around that?
Typically, so award leaderboard solutions out there, particularly for remote cultures or folks that have a bullpen where they're physically selling together in one room. Those are like two extremes that I think work really well for the award and leaderboard scenario. Typically the incentive and the push comes at the end of a period. It's not as useful or as effective in the beginning or in the middle, and you want to use other tools like a monthly business review or a team huddle. You want to use different tools to create the behaviors you're looking for. But if you're trying to drive, like, hey, we're 30% short of target, and typically we only close about 20% in this last week, we really need to dial it up. That's when you start to use, those award boards with greater effect. So there's different levers and dials that you can pull. I typically see it work best towards the end of a period.
Got it. Love that. Siva, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, if you talk about gamification as a tool to motivate and drive performance, it's not as much as a problem with your top reps. They are already inherently motivated and they are going to hit their numbers, whether you were to do anything or not. But as a ops person, that that's not your worry. It's always the folks in the middle who are going to be, a portion of worry for you, because they are the significant portion of reps in any company, and every single percentage point that you can move them to the right side means that you're absolutely going to able to move the needle on the revenue, right? So anything that you can do to incentivize the behavior, to push, to create a friendly competition, to gamify that experience for the middle is going to be super impactful, and that's what we're seeing in several companies.
Got it. No, great stuff. David, I'll get your take on that. What do you think?
Yeah, not a whole lot to add over what they both said, which is wonderful. But I think definitely, using the leaders, the ones that are going to constantly perform well, use them to really pull the middle of the pack upwards. That's that's certainly important, and gamification helps with that. Ultimately, gamification is a way for you as an organization to incentivize and drive a certain behavior. And that certain behavior, usually, you need to adapt. It's up to the strategy, what is needed. To Jeff's point, we use gamification a lot of the times to drive that period of the quarter, of the month, where not a lot is happening, and we want to incentivize people and push them so that not everything happens at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter. So that always helps. And again, either pulling the middle of the pack upwards, or the whole team, getting them to focus on the beginning of the month or the first month of the quarter. Whatever you're trying to drive, that behavior, gamification helps you do it for sure.
Yeah, agreed. Awesome. Love that. Okay, fantastic. Well, I want to just end it with one last question here, and I want to get all your guys' takes on this one, which kind of sums up the whole thing. So, Siva, I'll start with you. How are you teaching your reps to utilize their compensation plans to help them structure their activities and what to focus on? Would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think on this one, I think one of the first things that we strongly ensure, or we try and advise other ops personnel as well, is to make sure, as I talked about at the start, to ensure reps have complete understanding of their commission plan, right? Whether it is through what ifs or visualization or whatever that you have to do, but get to the nitty gritties of the activities that are expected of them, and also the results of those activities, right? And specific aspects around, hey, yeah, you get these on certain tiers of revenue goals and all of that, but also what happens when for example, you get paid on bookings but collections don't happen. What is the clawback scenario, right? So that reps know that the first invoice collection or the responsibility that the invoices are collected is also on them, and they don't get clawed back, right? So it's super important to know all of those specific nitty gritties, and then have that clear understanding before you have the sign off on the commission document, so that reps then know all of the different responsibilities on them and align them to that activities that they have. The other example that I mentioned around pushing behavior towards a multi-year contract, again, very clearly demonstrating that in the incentive plan, so that that at the end of the day, the company wants you to push more multi-year contracts, and if you do that, you're going to be rewarded. So have that thought right from your first conversation, right after the sales qualified lead happens. You have that in mind. What you're pushing for, or what you're setting up for from a prospect standpoint. So it's super important, and all of it starts right right when you publish the commission plan, and before you have that sign off, having a very clear conversation, and also enabling them with things to help them visualize and see the what ifs, really.
Yeah, totally agree. David, do you have anything on that?
No, yeah, absolutely. I think we've talked through a lot of them today, which is wonderful. I think first of all, having a comp structured with the organization's goal in mind is crucial. You need to have alignment and sign off from top leadership, from the decision makers, so that you can communicate that down to the reps and that there is no confusion and nothing is lost in translation. If you have that and everything is fully transparent in terms of the discussions, whether it's the commission team, HR, finance, even legal, just make sure everybody's involved in that process. So when you're building it, the reps know that you come to them with a plan that's vetted by the rest of the organization. You acknowledge their inputs as well if they have concerns. You align with their managers and their directors and VPs. So ultimately, there's kind of you cover all scenarios, and also you have the right people in terms of sales leadership that are able to answer questions. So when a rep has a concern, the manager knows what the comp plan is supposed to mean. The territory head knows what we were trying to do, so that there is no miscommunication. And the last thing you want is the territory head coming and saying, "Yeah, guess what? We missed this. This doesn't make sense." But by everybody signing off and making sure that there's alignment and visibility, that you communicate things clearly, I think over communication with comp plans goes a long way. So that there's no confusion down the line, and that you ensure everybody's aligned, signed off on it. You need to run it through, some stress tests, multiple scenarios. Siva talked about clawbacks. You try to run. You don't know what you don't know. There's always scenarios that you don't know ahead of time, but history, data, you use it. Go back, see what happens, look at the different deals. If things were split between geos, between reps, people leave organization, people take it. There's so many different scenarios that you can really test the comp plans against. And the more you do it, the less questions down the line, the more alignment. And to Jeff's point, the less time that they spend on dealing with the logistics around this and the admin versus them needing to do what we want them to do and sell more and help growth.
Totally. And Jeff, I'll let you end it here with your final thoughts on that.
Yeah, so this is a fundamental conversation that sales managers need to have with their sales reps. In fact, it's a core responsibility. Not doing this well is inexcusable. So, as a sales manager, work on your craft. And I would just give a couple of easy steps here. First, go over the details. Go over the facts. The comp plan is a model. So you shake some inputs in, outputs come out. It should be straightforward. Walk through the mechanics of the plan. The second is go over the process. What is the process? When does the period close? What constitutes qualified? What is going to be what's going to qualify within period? What is the escalation process? Third, as David mentioned, listen to their feedback. Folks might say, wow, this plan really is wide of the mark. Here's why. Walk through it, listen, and you're going to have to address those concerns. Fourth is outlining their responsibilities, and this should be very clear as part of accepting any role, whether you're an internal transfer or you're hired externally. Fifth, this is where you start moving forward. You start developing an attack plan. What are we going to do as a sales leader to develop a plan to go forward? And then lastly, show them where they can go and who to go to if they have any questions, if they have any concerns. Some shops find out that they find their errors or omissions after the fact. How can they get to a place where they find out beforehand? How can they get those alerts and those layers, those notifications beforehand? So those are some things that I think could be super helpful for sales managers to have what I think should be a very easy conversation and table stakes conversation with their sales reps.
Amazing. I love the breakdown. That was great. Thanks, Jeff. Well, awesome, guys. This has been such a blast. I learned so much. And thank you all for taking the time to bless us with your knowledge and expertise on this specific topic. Please, if there's any questions that anybody has that we didn't get to, please, I'm sure if you go follow Jeff, David, or Siva on LinkedIn, shoot them a message. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. And again, Everstage, thank you so much for sponsoring this event. It's been fantastic. Go check them out. They're doing some awesome stuff. So again, David, Jeff, Siva, thank you so much for taking the time. And I'm really looking forward to doing it again soon sometime.